Hi there, accountants. I hope all is well, and I pray that as you're viewing this video that you're in the best of health and spirit. This video will cover Chapter 7, Recording Payroll, from QuickBooks Online for Accounting, 7th edition by Glenn Owings. So upon completion of this chapter, the student will be able to do the following: add a new employee, add payroll-related general ledger accounts, pay employees, and record payroll expenses and liabilities. So in Chapter 6, we had the privilege to add some investing and financing activities like the acquisition of a fixed asset and a long-term investment, as well as the sale of stock, payment of dividends, and acquiring and paying long-term debt to the Wild Water Sports Company. In this chapter, we would add payroll activities like adding employees, adding payroll-related accounts, and recording payroll expenses and liabilities to our Wild Water Sports Company. At the end of this chapter, you perform similar tasks assigned by your instructor. So the first step is to sign into your QuickBooks Online account. I am already signed in, and as mentioned, and as I continue to mention, I would strongly suggest bookmarking the QuickBooks sign-in link so it's easy for you to get to it. So the first step, we always want to make sure that we are starting off with the right foundation, much like a house. If you build on a foundation that is not sturdy, the house will eventually crumble. Hence why we use the trial balance as a guide to ensure or to help ensure, good word, to make sure that transactions that were previously recorded were recorded correctly. So we click on reports. Similar as we've done in previous chapters, we go to custom reports. You start off with standard, then we have custom because we save the trial balance. So we click on trial balance. I'll close the navigation bar by selecting the backward facing arrow so we can see more of the screen. Then from there, it sets the date from January 1st, 2027 to January 31st. We run the report. We'll scroll down. We want to make sure that the numbers tie. They do. Our total debits and total credits tie. But again, as mentioned in Chapter 6's video, you also want to make sure that the account balance for each of the individual accounts that they match. And if they do not and a number is off, you want to double click into the amount. It'll take you to the ledger, which shows you the detailed transactions and how the ending balance was calculated. So we're good to go from here. We move on to the next page. In this section, we are going to be adding a new employee to QuickBooks Online. So we continue from above. We want to make sure that the navigation bar is open. So I select the forward facing arrow. Now the navigation bar is open. We click payroll. From there, we click employees. Next, it asks us a few things to determine which level you want to use. But the key thing we want to do right now is to add an employee. So not ready for payroll, but still want to plaque in Troy's time, we can help. So in this case, obviously, we can see that there are some nuances, some differences with the version of the QuickBooks per the writing of the book versus some updates that they've made. So you won't click Don't Get Started. You simply select Add Employee. Then from there, we input the employee's name. So the first name is Donna. The last name is Chandler. All right, here it's asking for the email, and then it's also asking for the hire date. Here it's asking us for the address information, but right now where we are, it's not showing any address information. So here what we'll do, let's select add employee. Let's see what happens. All right, so once we add the employee, then from there, we can edit to add in the home address. So in this case, we see Donna Chandler. The email address wasn't given, but we do have her address. So we'll input it, which is 12 Ridgeway Lane, which is in Orlando, Florida. All right, so 12 Ridgeway Lane. All right, so it's not coming up. So what we will do, we can enter it manually. So 12 Ridgeway Lane. City is Orlando. The state is Florida. So you got to type it or use the drop down as I just did. And the zip code is 32807. So we update that. All right, so we don't see any information as it relates to, additional details. Let's see if it's given. No, there's no email. There's no birth date, hire date, anything of that nature. So we just leave it like this. We select save. All right, let's make sure that it'll let us save. Perfect. All right. So now the next thing, we go back to our employee list. All right. And then we add another employee. And now the name of this employee is Karen Vordale. All right. So again, it's a bit different from what we see in the textbook because, there's some updates to QuickBooks. So we just do Karen Vordale. We add employee. And then after we add the employee, we can edit the personal information. So we go to personal information, we select edit. Then we input the home address. The home address is 1554 Rose Avenue, number 4. And again, it's not showing up. So since we don't see the address, we'll enter it manually. So 1554 Rose Avenue, period, number 4. The city is Orlando and the state is Florida. So Orlando, the state is Florida. Then the next step, we input the zip code, which is 32804. So once we input that, we select save. All right. So once we save it, it's going to take us back to the screen, but we go back to the employee list because we want to add another employee. So back to the employee list, we select add an employee again. This time the employee's name is Ryder Zakovic. So Zacovic. All right. We save it. And then from there, again, once we save it, we select edit under the personal information so we can input the address. So 12 Space Court. All right. So the information is not popping up. So therefore, we enter it manually. So 12 Spaceport Court. City is Orlando. State is Florida. Zip code is 32804. So now we select save. And now we go back to our employee list and we see that there are 3 employees. We have Jonna Chandler, we have Karen Vordale, and we have Ryder Zakovic. So now we go to the next page. And now it says, once again, if you were using QuickBooks Payroll Online, general ledger accounts to capture payroll information, they would be created for you in the setup process. So in this case, even though you're not using QuickBooks Payroll Online, a payroll expense and a payroll tax to pay other current liabilities account have already been included in your chart of accounts. An employer agrees to pay its employees a salary per month or an hourly rate, in either case, for the agreed upon salary or hourly rate times the hours worked. The amounts are recorded to the payroll expense account. And depending on the state, the employees are required to have an estimated amount of federal and state income taxes withheld from their paychecks by their employees. And in addition, the employers, they must withhold Social Security tax, which is 6.2%, and Medicare taxes, which is 1.45%. Any amounts withheld from the employees, they'll be recorded in a payroll tax payable account, which is a liability, until it is remitted to the U.S. Treasury and state government entities. The employers must match those amounts for Social Security, 6.2, and Medicare 1.45%. And these matching costs will be recorded as an additional payroll expense. So the payment of employees, it requires gathering information from each employee that helps determine the withholding amounts as well as the payroll expenses. The federal and state governments, they provide formulas as well as tables to help employers calculate these amounts. In the text, we're going to be provided with these amounts. The additional taxes such as training, unemployment, etc., they're going to be ignored for this illustration. And since payroll is a recurring event, it happens either every week, every other week, bi-weekly. It'll help to make these checks recur, which can be edited for each payroll for changes based on the hours worked where applicable. In this example, the payroll is paid semi-monthly, which is basically twice per month. So we have the information here as it relates to the payroll for Wild Water Sports. So we have how much Donna has earned, Karen has earned, and Ryder has earned. So we're going to need this information. We're going to have to refer back to it. So we continue where we left off. It wants us to select the new icon. So we open the navigation bar, we select new, and then we select check under vendor. And now the payee is going to be Donna, which is our employee, as we see here. We're going to type in the date as January 15th, 2027. The check number 1008 is already input. For the category, line 1, we're going to input payroll expenses, which is already here. In the amount, we're going to input $2,500. From there, we select tab, and we move on to column or line 2, rather. Next, we input payroll, wages. So payroll, wages, and tax to pay. And from there, we input a negative $533.75. And again, as the problem is letting us know, please be sure to enter this amount as a negative number. From there, we select tab, and we're going to move on to line 3. So here we input payroll expenses. We input this information, and then we type in the amount as $191.25. We press tab again. We move on to line 4, and in line 4, we input the payroll, wages, and taxes to pay. So once we input that, we input a negative $191.25. So based on all of the entries we see, it states that this is what our check should look like. So we see check 1008, the payee is Dollar Chandler, the payment date is January 15th, and we see that there's an amount to payroll expenses for a positive $2,500, a negative $533.75 to payroll, wages, and tax to pay, a positive $191.25 to payroll expenses, and a negative $191.25 to payroll, wages, and taxes to pay. So the next thing we do, here it says at the bottom of the screen, we would select make recurring. And here where it says the type, we select unscheduled. And then the next thing we want to do is to save the template. All right. So once we save the template, we click on the gear icon up above, and we go to lists. And under lists, we select recurrent transactions. And then once we do that, we click use, and the action for the Donna Chandler role. So here we see use, and then the check window is going to appear again. We make sure that the date is correct, and then we select save and new. So again, every time we, do this for Donna or for any of our employees, obviously if she was paid on the 15th, she probably won't get paid again until the 29th, all right? So that's the key thing. So again, it appeared the same way. We make sure that the date is correct, save and new. So we enter the payroll information found in figure 7.4 for Karen and Ryder the same way that we entered the payroll information for Donna above. So what we'll do, we'll go back to figure 7.4. We're going to save and new. Now we move on to check 1009. And we're going to be paying Karen, which is our employee. Same date, 1/15. So we start off with payroll expenses. All right. So with our payroll expenses, the total amount is going to be the gross pay of $1,440. From there, we debit the payroll, wages, and taxes to pay. And in the previous example, it was $533.75 for Donna. For Karen, it is a negative $307.44. Next, we move on to our payroll expenses. And for our payroll expenses, in the previous problem, the employer payroll tax expense was $191.25. In this case, It's $110.16 for the employer portion. And now we're going to factor in the employee's portion. So payroll, wages, and tax to pay will be a negative $110.16. So we see that our total net pay ties what is in the program. So we select make recurring, we select unscheduled, and then we save the template. So whenever we need to pay Karen, we basically can just come back and we can pay it. So now we go back. We can either go back or, to the payroll, but in this case, we'll just select use, and then we'll save in new. Or you can just go back to the navigation bar and select new check, either or. But now we're inputting the information for Ryder. So Ryder Zakovic, the check number is there. So we see his total gross pay. So we input the payroll expenses in the amount of $1,080. From there, we type in our payroll, wages, and tax to pay. And in this case, the employer withholding is a negative $230.58. We type in our payroll expenses to account for the employer's portion of Medicare taxes, which in this case was $82.62. And next, we finish off the entry with accounting for the payroll, wages, and taxes to pay the employee portion, which is a negative $82.62. And we see that the total amount reporting on check 1010 reflects what is the net check amount. So we input all of the information. We make recurring again. We select it as unscheduled, and we save the template for Donna, Karen, and Ryder. So after we input all of these, then we are good to go. We save and close it. And now we click reports because we want to make sure that everything was input correctly. We click on our trial balance. And then from there, we set the date to the 31st. We run the report. I'm going to close my navigation bar so there's more space. And we want to make sure that everything ties. So as we scroll down, we see that see 103. So we see something is off. So this is good. So now we see something is wrong. So we need to determine what is wrong. Here we see, so that's what I was mentioning. When the total debits and credits tie, that does not mean that everything is correct. So the first thing we see is that, okay, the checking account is off. In my trial balance, it shows 104,246.19. In the book, it shows 103,396.77. So first thing I'll do, let me get my calculator so I can determine exactly how much it is off by. So for me, it shows $104,246.19. The book shows $103,396.77. So it's off by $849.42. What's the problem? That number sounds familiar. So I didn't save the entry for Ryder. So therefore, I need to go back to the check 1010. I think the issue is that it did not save. Correct. So that's the exact issue. So for Ryder, now I input the information 1010. And I made it recurring before I actually saved it. So maybe I can actually find it. Let's see. So if I go to my gear, go to recurring transactions, because I did save the template. So, okay, perfect. So I'll use this. And since the information is already there, I would save and close since the template was saved. If the template wasn't saved and I didn't make it recurring, then obviously I'll have to input everything again. But because I saved the template, that helped to save me time. So now I'll go to the 31st, run report, and now we should see that everything ties. So I'll scroll down. So here we see our total debits is $749,520.80. Credits tie. But again, you also want to go through each individual account to make sure that the ending balances in a trial balance tie. So we click on the 103,396 and we look at the transaction report. And when we look at this information, we want to make sure that it ties. So we're going up to which date? I think the 23rd. So here we see that for this information, it basically wants you to compare everything. So I'll make this a little bigger. All right, let me scroll down a little. So here it's showing a bit of a difference in regard to the beginning balance. So the beginning balance in this case should be 25,000. So there's some nuance somewhere along the line. But we look at the amount. So we see 155,145. We see 1132.56, 849.42, 1966. We see the 56,000 for Malibu boats. So let's double check. For Malibu boats, I'm not seeing Malibu boats. So look, let's see, there should be one thing missing. 50, 1,500, 10, 3,000. All right. So again, this is one of the reasons why you go back, you double check. So with the checking account, I am going to change this to the classic view. I prefer the classic view over the new view. All right, so 31,000. So the ending balance is correct, but something is throwing it off. Let's see, I believe it has to do with the beginning balance. So what I will do, I will make it all dates, run the report. And I think it has something to do with the date. So, yep, perfect. Here we go with the dates for Malibu boats. The date should be 1/18/2027. So I'm going to update this. So it should be 1/18/2027. So I'll save and close it, and that should update it. So the issue is that it was the wrong date, hence that threw it off. So now once I make that update, we see that it should tie. So 25,000, and then let's see, 55,000. So I want to make sure that none of the dates are off. So for this opening balance, as we see here, for the 25,000, this should be the beginning balance. So let me see. This should be I'm gonna make it January 1st. I'm gonna make it January 1st, save and close. All right, so this information has been input, and we are essentially good to go from there. All right, so next we move on. We look at our writer, and from there, with writer, we go back to the summary report. And again, you can do the same thing with yours, go through it, everything. We click on the gear icon as we saw up above. We click recurring transactions, and then we see that we have these three. We have the first, which was Donna Chandler, Karen, and Ryder. But, obviously it's in, backwards order. Same thing, though. We still see it. So we use Ryder Vortic. We select use. And then we type the 31st. So on the 31st, check 111 is already there. And then the payroll information for semi-monthly is there. So we essentially need to update the information. So for Ryder, instead of it being 1,080, it's 1,034. The payroll, wages, and taxes to pay is $242.11. The payroll expenses for the employer is $86.75. And it's also a negative $86.75 for the employee. So we select save and close. And then we essentially need to do the same thing for the others. We select Karen. And when we go to Karen, in this case, for Karen, the payroll expense, the total amount is $1,500. The payroll, wages, and tax to pay is $320.25. The employer payroll tax expense is $114.75, a negative $114.75. So we select save and close. All right. And then we do the same thing for Donna. So we select use. And for Donna, we see that nothing needs to be changed because for Donna, she receives the same amount. She's an annual salary versus hourly. So therefore, we just select save and close. We input the information. And now we select reports. We want to make sure that everything ties. So we go to our trial balance. As of the 31st, we run the report. So we want to make sure, again, that our total debits and credits, as well as the amount in each of the respective accounts tie. It does. So we click on the 99,000. Again, we want to make sure that everything ties. And we see that our ending balances are the same, 99,358.88. I see there's some difference. I'll look a little deeper into that. But for the most part, our ending balance is the same. So it probably has something to do with a date that is off. All right, so that's one of the key things too, just making sure that all of the dates are correct. So I'm going to look into that, but we go back to the summary report. We compare the figure with 713. We click on any payroll transaction related, and then any errors that we discovered, those would be fixed. So this brings us to the end of chapter 7, payroll. So in this chapter, we added new employees, paid employees, and in the next chapter, we will work with budgets and bank reconciliations.